Maria, thank you so much for being with us today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Well, I know a little bit about your background just from your work with Catholic Charities and being in when you came in, but I want our viewers to hear about your story, a little bit about your background.
So I think it's interesting, but that's maybe personal, maybe to attempt to make myself more interesting. Both of my parents are immigrants to this country. My father fled the revolution in Cuba, and my mother came as a secretary for my uncle's coffee business in New Orleans. And so they met here with the Hispanic community and fell in love, and they've been married for, I'm a bad daughter, I don't remember how many years. I barely remember how many years I've been married. But so I was the first of their children born here. So I have 3 siblings, so I'm the oldest of 4, and we are very much entrenched in our Hispanic background and culture and what that means. My father to this day misses Cuba like he's never left it. I mean, and even now when I ask him, he's 90, he's going to be 92 this year. I said, they're opening it up and would you like to go? And he said, I want to remember it as it was. Mm-hmm. So, but we've had strong ties and everything. And so, they both have been here in New Orleans the whole time, raised their children here. And so I'm a New Orleanian, tried and true. I've tried many times to escape it, and it has never gone through. I am a proud product of the Jefferson Parish School System. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate enough to go to Louisiana School in Natchitoches. I was the 4th graduating class from a brand new school. My parents had no idea what that was. They didn't even understand a lot of what the mechanics were until I told them that I had to find this small, tiny town in central Louisiana to go for the second part of my interview, and they had to look for it on the map. So, so I went there, and then I graduated from Loyola University in 1992 with a degree in political science.
Wow. And just the Cuban culture here, the Hispanic culture here, has a lot of ties to the faith community, the Catholic
yes.
faith and the Catholic Church. And I know in your early days out of Loyola, you actually did some work with Catholic Charities then.
Yes. So I've always been, my parents have always very much stressed, you give back to the community, always. So growing up, if there was a hurricane somewhere, my father worked for Chiquita, so he was able to use a lot of the shipping capabilities because Chiquita was here in New Orleans. So my parents would organize disaster drives at our house and would accept clothing and shoes and food and everything. And my family would pack it up and we'd send it via container to Honduras. So we've always sort of, and my father was very involved in local politics, but also the church, my mother also. So when I went through my education at Loyola, 2 things spoke to me specifically as a Jesuit institution. One was men and women for others, mm-hmm. which is deeply ingrained in my psyche, but also in the psyche of our children. So my husband graduated from Jesuit, was not fortunate to go to a Jesuit university, but we very much lived that credo in our family life with our children. And then the second was to always reflect and question and look at both sides and pick the side that leads you closest to Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so that's always been something that, while I might not be the most consistent churchgoer, I live that every day in my work at Catholic Charities, and I lived that at the time when I was working with the different student advocacy groups at Loyola. So that's always been just a thread that's sort of run through my life.
And you've been able to choose Catholic education for your children.
Absolutely.
And now you find working for Catholic Charities, it's a little bit of a full circle with your parents organizing disaster drives and now you being in a role, a directive of advancement that you are called upon to help in times of crisis locally and beyond.
Right. And it was, it was a struggle for us with, and that I have a set of triplets. Mm-hmm. And so 3 tuitions at once, and was a financial sacrifice for our family, but we really felt that it would ground them in the beliefs that we wanted them to have, the moral center that we wanted them to have. It was very important for us. We could have chosen other schools when they went into high school, maybe a public school or a different
Another
tuition-based school.
Sure,
right.
Sure.
But one of the things that directed us to each of the schools that they went to was they had a very strong service component
Yes.
with their school. And I wanted my children to understand that suffering is consistent and it's lifelong for people, and they needed to be connected to that in some level. So every gift they received, they had to pay it forward in service. So Jesuit has a strong tradition, Holy Cross has that strong tradition, and certainly Ursuline with its motto of Serviam is, and I wanted my daughter in particular to have that because I felt that with her personality, she was best suited to sort of bring a lot of that caring and awareness to the rest of our community.
So you've had this mantra, it was instilled in you in your family life. You've tried to instill it into your children. And I want you to, if you are comfortable, elaborate a little bit more on what you're passing this on to your daughter and why that is so important to you.
So, and, I realize in this day of fluid gender roles and don't assign particular attributes to different sexes and genders and everything, that it might be a little weird to say I believe that women are just sort of made to be the nurturers.
I don't think that is weird to say. I think that is embracing our femininity.
So, and that's empowering in a sense.
I agree.
So when you guide with that, I want Annalisa to not be ashamed of those qualities. There's strength in that. There's strength to being the one that can step outside of the comfort zone of I shouldn't, that person's in pain, but I don't want to bother them or whatever. But sometimes you need to reach that hand forward, and that may be the only hand that they see that day that says, I care. And there's power in that. And I want her to understand that. And I want her to harness it, and I want her to give it certainly to her children, but to be an example of that in the church. And so, my husband was mystified when I said when we got married, I needed to have a bouquet for Mary. And he had never heard of that before. So I don't, maybe it's the male household. I don't know. But for me, Mary was a very powerful figure. And because of her love, I don't know that there's ever anything more powerful than seeing the Pietà with her son draped in her arms and the pain that she must have felt. Every year, my husband and I watch Passion of the Christ, and I just die when I see her face as she's watching her son. Yeah. So, that gift that we have as females to bring life into the world, we're also given the responsibility of crafting these humans. So the jury's still out on whether or not I've actually done my job properly. But I'd like to think that, the gifts that we've given them of a faith-based life at home, of wanting to not only bring in God's grace, but to spread it through service, is something that my children will walk away from. And I feel was sort of the thing that I had to impart as a female within the church, was that nurturing and that love.
And how do you bring that into your work with Catholic Charities?
So I love my job. I absolutely love my job. And there are moments, as you and I both know, where we have been tested. But I feel that those tests, and it's an old adage, and some people may say it's cliche, but that which doesn't kill us only makes us stronger. And Lord knows we have certainly experienced that. I love my job. My only wish with my job is that I wish I had the opportunity to interact more with the folks that we help.
Yeah.
That is what drives me. And I wish I had the opportunity to see them on a daily basis, to know how we're affecting their lives. And so every time I go out and I spread the word about Catholic Charities to a donor or a supporter or anybody, to me, I tell them that we help everyone. And that comes from love. That comes from the Pope speaking to Catholic Charities when they gathered a few years ago, and his address to them where he says, we are the mission of the actual service arm of the church. And so for me, that spoke very highly to what I felt. Even though I'm in an administrative role, my purpose is to cultivate the messaging and the print materials to not only bring people in, but make them adherents to the mission of what we're doing in the community.
Well, Maria, I want to close a little bit by talking about that bringing that femininity to everything we do. And Edith Stein, St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, she speaks her writings are so often about just that, you know, and I think I always take away, no matter what I want my daughters to do or what I approach, they could be neurosurgeons, they could be cloistered nuns, they could be stay-at-home moms, but bringing exactly what you talked about, that model of Mary and that nurturing side of fostering love and formation into everything you do. So I don't think it's outlandish or weird in this day and age just to say that. I think that you have given us a beautiful witness, and that your goal of striving for your daughter and your sons who need to grow up to support women in their roles.
Well, I'll apologize right now on the record to their wives. I may not have done the best job with teaching them to pick up after themselves, but I'd like to think that I've taught them how to treat their wives when it comes to a marriage and what the wife's role is supposed to be in the household. So they unfortunately grew up a very strong-minded mother, but a loving, faith-based mother who wants them to understand what their obligations are to the world.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much,
You're
Maria,
welcome.
for being with us, and thank you for the work that you do with Catholic Charities.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.